Hello students, welcome to the EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Saroj Malik from the Department of Political Science. Today we are discussing module Contemporary Women Writers and Feminism in India, Shashi Deshpande, Taslima Nasreen, Kumkum Sangari, Vina Majumdar, Neera Desai from paper Feminism and Women's Movement. To familiarize the objective of the module is to familiarize the learner with the writings and feminist thought of some Indian contemporary writers. The first writer in the module is Shashi Deshpande. Shashi Deshpande is a well-known name in the field of Indian literature. Deshpande has been labeled as a feminist because of her concern with women characters and the situations in which they find themselves. She believes that she simply writes about what she sees around her and that her ideas follow naturally. Women are portrayed in all roles. They are shown fulfilling their duties as a mother, daughter, sister, wife, and beloved. Their stories are set in the Indian background, depicting patriarchal Indian society and the norms. She was born in the year 1938 in Karnataka. Her father, Shri Ranga, was an eminent Kannada dramatist and writer. She received her early education at the Protestant Mission School in Karnataka. Since childhood, she was fond of English literature and used to read various types of English books. She pursued her education in Dharwad, Bombay, and Bangalore. She had a very sharp mind. She received degrees in economics and law. In fact, she was a gold medalist. She did MA in English literature. After getting married, she shifted to Bombay. During her stay in Mumbai, she decided to pursue a course in journalism. So she got herself in Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. Thereafter, she took up a job as a journalist in the magazine Onlooker. She worked there for a couple of months. While working with the magazine, she began writing, and the first short story that she wrote got published in 1970. Her short stories had it their way in popular magazines like Femina, Eve's Weekly, etc. Major works: The Dark Holds No Terrors, 1980, That Long Silence, 1988, The Building Wine, 1993, Matter of Time, 1996. In 1990, she got Sahitya Academy Award for the novel The Long Silence. Thematic Concern. Her novels are mainly based on women's lives and their problems, particularly in the Indian context. For this reason, she had been labeled as a feminist. She explored the realities behind the silence of women. She raised her voice against torment on women and also created mass awareness in this matter through her writings. Her novels usually have women as protagonists. This has led readers to call her a feminist writer. Her writings are complex but seamlessly women narratives which explore the lives of people, especially women. Unconsciously, her writings are informed by feminism, which she finds a source of strength. Bits and pieces come together at odd times and places and finally merge a sequenced whole. Many of her women characters learn to break free of the stereotype, for instance, of the mother and wife who remains silent and sacrifices her own needs and her own self. One theme which reoccurs in many of her books is rape, both as a random violent act and within marriage. It is a subject which society prefers not to discuss. In her shorter as well as larger fiction, she mainly dwelt on man-women relationship within the ambit of family and society. The search for self is an outstanding characteristic of her stories as well as novels. She has probed into the suffocated psyche of women to lay bare their ambitions and frustrations, soothe their aches and pains, and activate their slumberous feminine. Most of her stories give voice to the predicament women. But the dangers from within as without situation, despairing or destabilizing, suffering physical or psychic, she does not let family disintegrate. In matter of time, she explored different dimensions of women's experience in India. Her work has helped to break the silence on some of women's issues which were not discussed in the past and to raise people's awareness. She believes that men and women write differently and that they write about different subjects. Her contribution to the world of literature is presentation of reality of women. She writes for women, presents their problem, and lets the world know the problems that women of today are facing. The transparency of language and spontaneity of prose are the outstanding feature of her style. Thematic concerns. Her novels are mainly based on women's lives and their problems, particularly in the Indian context. For this reason, she has been labeled as a feminist. She explored the realities behind the silence of women. She raised her voice against torment on women and also created mass awareness in this matter. Through her writings, her novels usually have women as protagonists. This has led readers to call her a feminist writer. She is of the view that in calling her novel feminist, one straitjackets the works, imprisons them with a label. She feels that while she is a feminist, she has not written the novels as a debating voice to develop a thesis in a debate. Her novels are open examinations of the experience of people in specific setting. She says, do not read these novels only within the framework of feminist concerns. They are novels like any other with a gamut of issues and experiences. She writes on feminist themes. Her plots mold into emphatic pictures of feminist point of view. She has unfolded the problem of women in a patriarchal society in a very positive way. She says that women have every right to live her life, to develop her qualities, to take her decisions, to be independent, and to take charge of her duties. The novels portray the suffering and deprivation of a woman's pain, her cries, her anxiety. Nature has created her for her exploitation and use and for bearing every trouble, sorrows, blows, and pains bestowed on her by man. The Long Silence, written in 1988, emphasizes her real individual self. Taslima Nasreen, an award-winning writer, physician, secular humanist, and human rights activist, is known for her powerful writings. The emergence of the feminist writing inaugurates one of the most controversial moments in the scene of Bangladeshi literature. She is known for being a fiery feminist whose work deals mostly with oppression and unflinching criticism of religion despite forced exile and multiple fatwas calling for her death. In India, Bangladesh, and abroad, her fiction, non-fiction, poetry, and memoir have topped the bestsellers list. Her writings won the hearts of people across the border, and she landed with the prestigious literary award Ananda from India in 1992. She got honorary citizenship from Paris. She received her second Anand Puraskar award in 2000. Born in 1962, she is a Bengali author and former physician who has lived in exile since 1994. On account of threat call, she has lived in many countries from 1994 to 2004. Exile in the West 2004 to 2007, exile and life in Calcutta. She left for West in 2008. Life in exile 1994 to 2004. Exile in the West, leaving Bangladesh towards the end of 1994. She lived in exile in Western Europe and North America for 10 years from 2004 to 2007. Life in Calcutta in 2004. She was granted a renewable temporary residential permit by India and she moved to Kolkata. Then expulsion from Kolkata. In 2007, Muslim leader in Kolkata reviewed an old fatwa against her. Kolkata witnessed violent protests against Nasreen by Muslims. After the riots, she was forced to move from Kolkata to New Delhi. She was under house arrest for 7 months. She moved to Sweden in 2008. From a literary profile as a poet in the late 1980s, she rose to global fame by the end of the 20th century owing to her essays and novels with feminist views and criticism of Islam in particular and of religion in general. She works to build support for secular humanism, freedom of thought, equality for women, and human rights by publishing, lecturing, and campaigning. Early in her literary career, she wrote mainly poetry and published half a dozen collections, often with female oppression as a theme. She started publishing prose, essay collections, novels, short stories, and autobiographies from 1990 onward. Major works: The Opponent (1992), Shodh (1992), Nimantran (1993), Lajja (1993), Tell Him the Secret (1994), French Lover (2002), Memoir Amar Mein Bela, My Girlhood published in English in 2002, Shame Again 2009. She has written poetry, essay collection, novels, short stories, and autobiography Nirbasan, that is Exile, in 2012. Taslima in all her works obsessively comes back to the question of the female body as it is constructed by the Bangladeshi patriarchy. Her focus on the female body can be traced back through to her non-fictional works such as newspaper columns. Taslima Nasreen is the author of the controversial book Lajja. Lajja literally means shame, and true to its title, every right-thinking human being after reading this book would be ashamed of the religious fanaticism that exists today in different parts of the world. Taslima Nasreen, her book Lajja was banned in her country and a fatwa, religious ostracization, was issued against her. She had to seek political asylum in France to save her life. Taslima was extremely bold. She remained untrammeled by all these and kept writing on similar lines. Her book, Lajja, is set in the backdrop of the Babri Masjid demolition saga back in the year 1992, which caused a strong religious, political, and social impact and resulted in riots in sensitive areas throughout the subcontinent. The story speaks about the atrocities and cruelties inflicted on Hindus in general. The story is gripping and the climax is poignant. Taslima in her tale buttresses her fiction with facts. Her attempt in this book is not to malign any religion. It is an earnest enter to the human race to embrace humanity and shun fanaticism. Her autobiography, My Bela, Girlhood in Bengali, is a richly detailed story of a traditional upbringing amid difficult change. She became a woman, both of controversy and spirit, seeking to deal not only on physical but also social ills, regardless of their origin. Taslima, the fiery feminist from Bangladesh, agreed the angered the Muslim clergy in her country by questioning the Quran and writing about sexuality, has written a bravely honest and brave memoir of her childhood. A critical scrutiny of her major novels showed 1992, Lajja 1993, Fera 1993, and French Lover 2002 clearly reveals that she writes with a purpose, and purpose is to oppose and fight against oppression and gender bias. She is with the victim and the marginalized against irrational authority. It does not matter whether authority is religious, social, or patriarchal. Another important theme which preoccupies the mind of the writer is gender biases. Herself a victim of patriarchal structures, she asserts their right to freedom, right to healthy life, and right to equality. Similarly, another theme captures her mind is the theme of home and homelessness. Injustice against women and their oppression happens to be an equally important. She emerges as a crusader for women's rights. She acts as a champion for women's right of living with honor and independence in the framework of human dignified equality. Kumkum Sangari. She teaches English at Indraprasth College, Delhi University and is a fellow at the Center for Contemporary Studies. She has published extensively on literature, critical theory, religious conversion, medieval devotional traditions, and contemporary gender issues. Together with Suresh Ved, she edited a collection of essays entitled "Women and Culture" and has carried out extensive research on widow immolation in Rajasthan. Major works: Kumkum Sangari, co-edited with S. Ved, Women and Culture, 1985; Kumkum Sangari and Suresh Ved, Recasting Women: Essays in Indian Colonial History, 1990 and 1999; Kumkum Sangari, Politics of the Possible: Essays on Gender, History, Narratives, Colonial English, 2002; Kumkum Sangari and Uma Chakravarti, From Myths to Market. Thematic Concern. Recasting Women examine the impact of patriarchy of women's daily lives during the colonial period, specifically in relation to caste and class. Methodologically, Recasting Women breaks new ground in historiography of the 19th century Renaissance in Bengal because it substitutes colonial discourse from imperial history as the darkest days of nationalist agitation, they seek to reconstruct the old monolithic of British colonialism with all conspirational connotations. The radical point of departure for the feminists in the volume is their contentions that the common theme of female emancipation during the Renaissance is false. Unlike an earlier generation of Indian feminists who applauded the last century's effort to abolish sati, child marriage, and Kulin polygamy, at the same time it encouraged widow remarriage and higher education for women. Recasting women was a pioneering effort in more ways than one, in making a conscious decision to ask men to write on gender issues. The editors were making a political statement about the potentials of Indian feminism. It could be an inclusive rather than an exclusive political movement. Contrary to the then prevalent position of American radical feminists, the writer believed that women and men who worked religiously, rigorously in the mainstream social sciences and humanities could be persuaded to use their knowledge in a different way. In nutshell, the book is a reflection on the reproduction and regulation of patriarchy in different caste, class within colonial period, and all aspects are gendered. The political and social life of India in the last decade has given rise to a variety of questions concerning the nature and resilience of patriarchal systems in a transitional and post-colonial society. In the book, "The Politics of the Possible", the collection of essays cover a broad range of disciplines to produce a work that rethink relationship and division in gender, geography, class relations, and much more to create a true polities of social location and the connection between local, metropolitan, and colonial geographies as they bear on debates about the nature of knowledge, the transnational and regional production of ideologies such as altruism under the aegis of colonialism, ways of theorizing women's labor, literary, and consent to patriarchal arrangements and dominant ideologies. Sangri analysis of English and the relationship between literature and the non-literary change the way we consider the division between the metropolitan and the subcontinental. In her discussion of capitalism and colonialism, her egalitarian feminist viewpoint opens up questions and issues of cultural autonomy and heredity. She also critiques the impact of race, caste, class, religion, misogyny, or patriarchal ideology and its effects on women. The politics of the possible, mapped by these essays, present itself in several areas as a mere sensitive historiography, as the social potential for secular, and as the elements of resistance produced by the contradictions of different structures of oppression. Vina Majumdar. She was an Indian academic, left-wing activist and feminist, a pioneer in women's studies in India. She was a leading figure of the Indian women's movement. She was the first woman academic to combine activism with scholarly research in women's studies. She personified in her a far-sighted and strong-willed thinker and forceful speaker and debater who had faith in human goodness. Her intellectual process did not make her ivory tower in her approach towards her colleagues and fellow academicians, policymakers, researchers, and feminist activists. Born in 1927, completed her schooling in Calcutta. She did her honors course from Banaras Hindu University. In 1947, she went to Oxford to complete her graduation in 1951. In 1962, she completed her D.Phil from Oxford University. She taught political science at Patna University and Berhampur University. She was selected as Fellow of the Indian Institution of Advanced Studies, Shimla. In 1972, she was appointed as Member Secretary of Committee on the Status of Women in India. She was founder director of the Centre for Women's Development Studies, New Delhi from 1980 to 1991, chairperson from 1996 to 2013. She was heart and soul of Indian Association of Women's Studies. She was a great champion of participatory action research. Major works: Education and Social Change, Three Studies on 19th Century India, 1972. Towards Equality, 1974. Role of Rural Women in Development, 1978. Symbols of Power. Studies on the Political Status of Women in India, 1979. Peasant Women Organize for Empowerment, Bankura Experiment, 1989. Thematic Concerns. Vina Majumdar was an academician, activist, and institution builder. Her contribution to the women movement and feminist research is seminal. One of the key researchers and writers of the landmark report of the Committee on the Status of Women in India. Her autobiography, Memoirs of a Rolling Stone, published by Juban Books in 2010, is a significant contribution to the research repertoire of women's writing in India. The memoir documents her eventful life from her childhood, gradual politicization, marriage, family, and experiences as an academic and administrator. The enormous collective labor involved in writing the foreword, equality report, and finally the setting up of Center for Women's Development Studies to initiate and focus scientific research on women that is strongly rooted in women's lived experiences. What makes this book significantly different is that it is by a woman whose life story is a direct affront to patriarchal normative structures. Simultaneously, it also reflects the common concerns of a working mother juggling professional and personal commitments. She is also known as recorder of the Indian women's movement and grandmother of women's studies in South Asia. The note of dissent by Vina Majumdar and Lautika Sarkar voiced over on the issue of women's reservations in state assemblies and the parliament. Their position that the formal model equality does not do justice to the inadequate representation of women from the grassroots. As an activist, in her late years, she deeply involved with other activities and academics. Campaigns on anti-rape, anti-dowry, child marriage, sex selection technique add public furor over the Sati incident of Roop Kanwar in Deorala in Rajasthan is chronicled with great care. Neera Desai. She was the front-runner of women's studies in India and the creator of Model Women's Studies Center that combined the ethos of women's studies and women movement at the SNDT University, Mumbai. She was born in 1925 in a middle-class Gujarati family that ardently supported freedom movement. She actively worked for the Monkey Brigade formed by Mahatma Gandhi. Later on, participated as a college student at the time of Quit India movement in 1942. Her husband, Dr. A.R. Desai, was an eminent sociologist. Her doctoral thesis in sociology touched economic, anthropological, and historical dimension of women in modern India. It provided the historical understanding of status of women in India from the Vedic period to the early years of independent India. She was the professor and head of the Department of Sociology at S&DT Women University, Mumbai. She was founder director of Research Center for Women Studies and a distinguished fellow at Center for Women Development Studies, Delhi. She played a crucial role in the Towards Equality report in 1974, the Shram Shakti report of 1988, and National Plan for Women 1988 to 2000. During 1990s, she took up the task of preparing the profile of 10 feminists from Western India by using the qualitative method of research. It took 17 years to complete this work, and as a result, a solid volume emerged in the form of Feminism as Experience, Thoughts and Narratives, Sound Picture, Archives for Research on Women, Sparrow in 2007. Major works: Neera Desai, Women in Modern India: A Decade of Women Movement in India 1957. Neera Desai and Tirupati Shah, Bharat Mein Nari Andolan. Neera Desai, Social Change in Gujarat 1978. Neera Desai and Maitri Krishna Raj, Women and Society in India 1987. Neera Desai and Vibhuti Patel, Indian Women, Change and Challenges in the International Decade 1985 and 1990. Another writer is Neera Desai. She is a renowned scholar of women's studies and has been one of the pioneers of research on issues of feminism, gender dimensions in family, women's movement, and education. Her research and writing reflect a deep concern for issues related to gender and power and an effort to understand the social constructions of feminist ideology. She always looked upon herself as a crusader of all progressive, secular, democratic, and people's movement. Through her books, she presented an account of Indian women's journey towards gender equality in the context of changing political, economic background and values which legitimize inequality. As an activist, she has also been associated with organizations aimed at advancing people's rights such as VACHA, Women's Resource Centre, India Centre for Human Rights, and Law and Sound and Picture Archives for Women in Mumbai. Awag, Ahmedabad Women Action Group, Sahyas in Vadodara, Astitva Mahila, Uttarkashi, Sanstha Valsad. She supported Narmada Bachao Andolan, the Kashtkari Sangathan, and women rights group in whatever she was. She would attend 8th March International Women Day rallies held by United Front of Women's Organization without fail. Though these are associations, she successfully sought to bridge the gap between academics and activism. Her participation in a wide range of activities, ranging from research and writing to political activism and grassroots development, stemmed from an understanding that academic life would be sterile without hands-on experience in rusticating social change. She was able to contribute to some of landmark policy documents that aimed at expanding opportunities for women. As member of the Social Task Force in the Committees on Status of Women in India, established by Government of India, of the National Commission of Self-Employed Women and Women in Informal Sector in 1987. To her research teachings and extension activities were not discrete categories, but rather intricately woven. Her educational philosophy was shaped by Gandhian and the New Left ideals. She believed that education should participate in social development and reconstruction. It was also shaped by political upheavals initiated by the various tribal, peasant, and student movements since the 1960s. From the ideological location, she shaped the Research Center for Women's Studies as a movement within the academia to break the academic isolation of the university system. She had to face subtle discrimination and indifference to her ideas. Sociology of 1950s and 60s was very male-centered and not offer space for gender questions. Sociologists therefore dismissed her ideas. From a sympathizer of the women movement, she became a fellow feminist. She was of the opinion that to construct knowledge on women with women's sensitivities, sensibilities, and women prism, they needed five arms: Panch Mahabhuts: teaching, training, documentation, research, and action. She will always be remembered as a very warm, kind, and empathetic individual who was humble even when she was at the peak of her career. She was among these nominated for the 1000 Women for the Nobel Peace Prize. She took women's studies to newer lights in terms of its epistemological growth and construction of a new body of knowledge for strengthening transformation processes for better quality of life, not only for women but for all humanity. She was of the opinion that the women liberation cannot come about without liberation of humankind. So students, let's summarize what we have learned in this module. Shashi Deshpande was labeled as a feminist because of her concern with women characters and the situations in which they find themselves. Taslima Nasreen fought against oppression, fundamentalism, communalism, bigotry, racism, patriarchy, and gender biases. Kumkum Sangari depicted in her writings nature of patriarchal systems in a transitional and post-colonial society. Vina Majumdar, known as grandmother of women's studies in South Asia, voiced against the question of adequate representation of women in state assemblies and parliament. Neera Desai was the pioneer of research on issues of feminism, gender dimension in family, women's movement, and education. Thank you.